The massive doors of the Galactic Fight Council chambers stood 30 feet tall. They were made of metal stronger than diamond, and decorated with the symbols of 100 warrior species. Behind these doors, the most feared beings in the galaxy made decisions that could destroy entire worlds. Today they were talking about humans. The council chamber was huge. It could hold thousands of beings, but today only the most important ones were here. They sat in rows that went up and up like a giant stadium. Each species had their own section. The Vorthak predator lords sat in the highest seats, looking down at everyone else. Their black skin was covered in scars, and their red eyes glowed in the dim light. "Humans want to join our federation," said Elder Kethmore. He was old even for his long-lived species. His voice echoed through the chamber. "They say they are warriors. They say they deserve to fight beside us." A sound like thunder rolled through the chamber. It was laughter. The Vorthak were laughing so hard that some of them fell off their seats. "Humans?" roared Kethvar the Render. He was the biggest and meanest of all the predator lords. His claws were longer than swords, and each one had killed 1,000 beings. "Those soft pink things? They have no claws, no fangs, no armor. They cry when they are hurt." More laughter filled the chamber. Other species joined in. The crystal beings made sounds like breaking glass. The insect creatures clicked their mandibles. Even the peaceful energy beings flickered with what might have been amusement. "I have hunted humans," said another predator lord. "They taste like fear, sweet, delicious fear. They run and scream and beg for mercy. This is not the behavior of warriors." Elder Kethmore held up one hand. The laughter stopped. "The humans have sent an application. By law we must consider it." "Then let us consider it quickly," Kethvar said. His voice was like rocks grinding together. "And then let us reject it. Humans are prey. They have always been prey. They will always be prey." The other council members nodded. The Zephyrian bird people ruffled their feathers in agreement. The stone giants made rumbling sounds. The decision seemed clear. "Very well," Elder Kethmore said. "All in favor of rejecting the human application?" Hands, claws, tentacles, and other body parts rose throughout the chamber. It was almost unanimous. All opposed? Only one being raised a hand. It was Ambassador Tichen of the Peaceful Union. She was small and gray, with large eyes full of sadness. "I believe we should give them a chance," she said quietly. The laughter started again. "Louder this time, you would," Kethvar snarled. "Your species never fights. You do not understand strength." "I understand many things," Tichen replied. "I understand that appearances can be deceiving." "Pretty words," said another predator. "Lord, but words do not win battles, Elder." Kethmore was about to call for the final vote when something happened. The great doors began to move. This was strange. The doors were locked during council sessions. No one could enter without permission. The security systems were the best in the galaxy, but the doors opened anyway. They opened with a sound like breaking worlds. Ancient hinges that had not moved in years screamed in protest. The noise echoed through the chamber like a death cry. Every being in the chamber turned to look. Some reached for weapons. Others prepared to run. A figure stepped through the doorway. It was small, much smaller than most of the beings in the chamber. It walked on 2 legs like some of the other species, but it moved differently. It moved like it owned the place. The figure came closer, and the lights revealed what it was. A human. But this was not the kind of human the predator lords were used to hunting. This one was different. She was young, maybe 20 Earth years old. She wore a uniform that had once been white and blue. Now it was mostly red. The red was still wet. It dripped onto the floor as she walked. Her hair was brown and tied back in a simple style. Her skin was pale like most humans, but her eyes were different. They were dark and cold and empty. They were the eyes of something that had seen too much death. In her right hand she carried something heavy. It was round and about the size of a large melon. She held it by what looked like hair. The chamber was completely silent now. Even the predator lords had stopped laughing. The human walked to the center of the chamber. There was a raised platform there where beings could speak to the council. She climbed onto it without asking permission. She looked around the chamber slowly. Her gaze moved from species to species, from warrior to warrior. When her eyes met theirs, many of the council members looked away. Finally, she reached the Vorthak section. She stared up at Kethvar the Render. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then she smiled. It was not a nice smile. She lifted her right hand and opened it. The thing she had been carrying fell onto the platform. It hit the metal floor with a wet sound that echoed through the chamber. It was a head, not just any head. It was the head of a Vorthak predator lord. The black skin was torn. The red eyes were dull and lifeless. The mouth hung open, showing rows of sharp teeth that would never bite again. But this was not just any predator lord. "By the ancient void," whispered one of the council members. "That is Zethkar the Destroyer," said another voice. "No," said Elder Kethmore, his voice shaking. "Look at the scars on the forehead. The pattern of the teeth." "That is Det Kethavar," finished the human. Her voice was calm and steady. "Kethavar the Render. Your champion, your undefeated killer of 1,000 worlds." The chamber erupted in chaos. Beings jumped to their feet. Some screamed. Some roared. Some made sounds that had no name in any language. The Vorthak predator lords were the loudest of all. They howled like wounded animals. Some of them tried to jump down from their seats to attack the human, but they stopped when she spoke again. "Who's next?" 2 words. Simple words, but they cut through the chaos like a blade through flesh. The chamber fell silent again. The human stood there, covered in blood, next to the severed head of their greatest champion. She looked around the chamber with those cold, empty eyes. "I asked a question," she said. "Who's next?" No one answered. No one moved. The most feared warriors in the galaxy sat frozen in their seats, staring at a small human female who had just done the impossible. She had killed Kethavar the Render, and she wanted to know who was next. Elder Kethmore finally found his voice. Who are you?" The human looked at him. For a moment, something almost like emotion flickered in her eyes, but it was gone so quickly that he might have imagined it. "My name is Sarah Chen," she said. "I am a cadet in the Terran Military Academy, and I am here to deliver humanity's application for membership in the Galactic Combat Federation." She reached into her uniform and pulled out a data pad. Despite everything that had happened, despite the blood and the chaos, the device was clean and undamaged. She set it down next to Kethavar's head. "I believe you were discussing our qualifications," she said. "I hope this helps with your decision." Then she stepped back and waited. The most powerful beings in the galaxy stared at her in stunned silence. And in that silence, everything changed. 3 days earlier, Sarah Chen had been excited about her first real mission. The transport ship Terra's Hope was not much to look at. It was old and slow, but it was her ticket to the stars. Sarah stood at the observation deck, watching space flow by like a dark river. She had never been this far from Earth before. "Beautiful, isn't it?" said Captain Rodriguez. He was an older man with gray hair and kind eyes. "I've been flying for 20 years and it never gets old." Sarah nodded. "I can't believe I'm really here. 6 months ago, I was just a student. Now I'm carrying humanity's most important message to the galaxy." The data pad in her pocket felt heavy. It contained Earth's formal application to join the Galactic Combat Federation. Years of work had gone into preparing it. Every word had been chosen carefully. "Don't worry, Chen," said Lieutenant Morrison. He was another cadet 2 years older than Sarah. "This is just a delivery mission. We drop off the application, maybe see some aliens, then go home. Easy." The ship carried 12 crew members. Most of them were young cadets like Sarah. This was supposed to be a safe mission, a chance for new officers to see the galaxy without danger. They were wrong. The attack came without warning. Sarah was in her bunk when the ship shook violently. Emergency lights flashed red. The alarm screamed through the corridors. "All hands to battle stations." Captain Rodriguez's voice came over the speakers. "We are under attack." Sarah ran to the bridge. Through the main window, she could see them. 3 ships, black as space itself, were closing in fast. They moved like hunting cats, silent and deadly. "Vorthak raiders," whispered the navigation officer. "We're dead." "No, we're not," Captain Rodriguez said firmly. "Send a distress signal. Prepare for evasive maneuvers." But it was too late. The first Vorthak ship fired. The blast hit their engines. Terra's Hope shuddered and began to drift helplessly through space. "Hull breach in Section 4, someone shouted. "We're losing air." The second ship fired. This time the blast was different. Instead of trying to destroy them, it seemed designed to capture them. "Boarding ships," Captain Rodriguez said quietly. "They want us alive." Sarah felt ice form in her stomach. Everyone knew what happened to humans who were taken alive by the Vorthak. The third ship attached itself to their hull like a parasite. Sarah could hear cutting tools working through the metal. The Predator Lords were coming. "All crew to the safe room," Captain Rodriguez ordered. "Maybe we can hold them off until help arrives." They ran through the corridors. 12 humans, young and afraid, racing toward what might be their tomb. The safe room was in the center of the ship. It had thick walls and its own air supply. It was meant to protect the crew from radiation, not from monsters. They sealed the door and waited. The first scream came 10 minutes later. It was Ensign Parker. Sarah recognized his voice. He had been standing guard at the main airlock. The scream lasted a long time, then stopped suddenly. "They're inside," Lieutenant Morrison whispered. Captain Rodriguez checked his weapon. "Remember your training. Stay calm. Watch your sectors. Don't waste ammunition." But what training could prepare them for this? They had learned to fight other humans, not creatures from nightmares. The second scream came from Petty Officer Williams. She had been in the engine room when the attack started. Her scream was higher than Parker's, more desperate. "They're playing with us," Chen realized. "They could break in here any time they want." "They're taking their time. Hunting us," said Morrison. His face was pale with sweat. "Like animals." Through the intercom they could hear the Predator Lords talking to each other. The language was harsh and full of clicking sounds. But sometimes they spoke in human languages, taunting them. "Little humans," one of them called. "Sweet little humans. Come out and play." The third scream belonged to Corporal Zhang. Then the fourth was Seaman Davis. One by one, the crew was being taken. "We have to do something," Sarah said. "We can't just sit here and listen to them die." "What can we do?" Morrison asked. "We're trapped," but Sarah was thinking. She remembered her survival training back on Earth. Her instructor, Sergeant Martinez, had been a hard man. He had made them do impossible things. "When you're the prey," he had told them, "sometimes the only way to survive is to become the hunter." Sarah looked at the safe room's ventilation system. The grates were small, but she was smaller. "I'm going out there," she said. "That's suicide," Captain Rodriguez said. "Staying here is suicide," Sarah replied. "They'll get us all eventually. At least this way I can try to help." Before anyone could stop her, she opened the ventilation grate and crawled inside. The air ducts were dark and narrow. Sarah had to move slowly to avoid making noise. She could hear the Predator Lords below her hunting through the ship. There were 5 of them. She could tell by their voices. 5 creatures that had killed thousands of beings across the galaxy. Sarah reached a grate that looked down into the main corridor. Through it, she could see one of them. It was huge, at least 8 feet tall, with black skin that seemed to absorb light. Its claws were like curved knives, and its teeth were designed for tearing flesh. This was Kethvar the Render. Though Sarah didn't know his name yet, he was dragging something behind him. Something that had once been human. Sarah felt something change inside her. The fear was still there, but it was different now. Colder, more focused. She had brought her sidearm, but it would barely scratch a Predator Lord's hide. She needed something else. She remembered the maintenance tools in Section 3. The plasma cutter, the gravity hammer, weapons disguised as equipment. Moving through the ducts like a ghost, Sarah made her way to the tool storage. Getting there without being seen took an hour. Every minute she heard more screams from the safe room. Her friends were dying while she crawled through the darkness. But when she finally reached the tools, Chen was no longer the scared cadet who had entered the ducts. She was something else. Something the Predator Lords had never faced before. She was human. The first Predator Lord died while he was eating. Sarah dropped from the ceiling behind him and put the plasma cutter through his spine. He didn't even have time to scream. The second one found his packmate's body an hour later. He roared in anger and confusion. Who could have done this? What could kill a Predator Lord? He never found out. Sarah was waiting in the shadows with the gravity hammer. One blow was enough to crush his skull. The third and fourth ones tried to hunt her together. They were smarter, more careful. They used their advanced senses to track her through the ship. But Sarah had advantages they didn't understand. She knew every inch of the ship. She could move through spaces too small for them. And most importantly, she could think. Predator Lords were used to hunting prey that ran in panic. Sarah didn't run. She planned. She set traps. She used the ship's systems against them. When the gravity failed in Section 7, The third predator lord floated helplessly while Sarah cut him apart with the plasma cutter. When the fourth one followed her into the cargo bay, she opened the outer airlock. Space took him, that left Kethvar. He was waiting for her in the main corridor, the biggest, strongest, most dangerous of them all, the creature that had killed 1,000 beings. "Clever little human," he said in perfect English. "You have impressed me. I will make your death quick." Sarah stepped out of the shadows. She was covered in alien blood. Her uniform was torn, but her eyes were steady. "You killed my friends," she said simply. Kethvar laughed. "I have killed many humans. You all taste the same." "Maybe," Sarah said, "but you've never been hunted by one before." The fight lasted 3 hours. Kethvar was stronger, faster, and more experienced. His claws could cut through metal. His hide could turn bullets, but Sarah was patient. She had learned patience from watching her cat hunt mice back home. She had learned endurance from running marathons. She had learned to think from her human brain. Every time Kethvar thought he had her cornered, she disappeared. Every time he thought he was winning, she surprised him. Slowly, the great predator lord began to feel something he had never felt before. Fear. In the end, Sarah won by doing something no warrior in the galaxy would expect. She talked. "You know what the difference is between you and me?" she asked, while Kethvar gasped for breath in the ruined corridor. "You are prey," he snarled. "No," Sarah said. "You hunt for fun. You hunt because you're strong. You hunt because you can." She picked up the plasma cutter. Kethvar tried to move, but he was too tired. "I hunt because I have to," Sarah continued. "Because my friends are dead. Because it's the only way to survive." She looked down at him with those cold, empty eyes. "We're persistence hunters," she said. "We don't give up, ever." The plasma cutter hummed to life. When it was over, Sarah sat alone in the ruined ship. 11 of her friends were dead. The predator lords were dead too. She was the only one left. Sarah walked to the bridge and activated the emergency beacon. Then she went to find something to put Kethvar's head in. She had a delivery to make. The silence in the council chamber stretched on and on. Hundreds of the galaxy's most dangerous beings stared at one small human and the severed head at her feet. Elder Kethamor was the first to find his voice. This cannot be real," he whispered. "Kethvar the Render has never been defeated. He has killed for 300 years. Sarah looked up at him. "He's not killing anymore." The Vorthak predator lords were making sounds like wounded animals. Some of them were clicking their claws together nervously. Others were backing away from the edge of their platform. "Impossible," snarled Zorthax, Kethvar's second in command. He was almost as big as his dead leader, with scars that told of 1,000 battles. "No single being can kill a predator lord, not alone." "I wasn't alone," Sarah said calmly. "I had help." Hope flickered in several alien faces. If the human had an army, if she had used weapons they didn't know about, then maybe this made sense. "What kind of help?" asked Elder Kethmore. Sarah's smile was cold as space. "I had my brain." The hope died. Ambassador Tichen of the Peaceful Union leaned forward in her seat. "Child," she said gently, "tell us what happened." So Sarah told them. She spoke in simple words without emotion. She told them about the transport ship, about her friends dying one by one, about crawling through air ducts while monsters hunted her crew. She told them about becoming the hunter. As she spoke, the aliens began to understand something terrible. This was not a story about superior weapons or lucky accidents. This was a story about something they had never seen before. Prey animal that refused to be prey. "You use the ship's systems against them," said Hive Speaker Zach. The insect beings' mandibles clicked with what might have been approval. "Clever. You turned their strength into weakness," added Crystalline Mind Veltar. The crystal being's thoughts were visible as colored lights under his skin. Right now those lights were confused and afraid. "You hunted them," finished Stone Chief Mordock. The massive rock creature's voice was like an avalanche. "Like we hunt prey animals," Sarah nodded. "Yes." The word hit the chamber like a bomb. In the Galactic Combat Federation, there were only 2 types of beings: predators and prey. The strong and the weak, hunters and food. Humans were supposed to be prey. Everyone knew this. They were soft and weak and afraid. They had no claws or fangs or natural armor, but prey animals did not hunt predator lords. How? The question came from a dozen different species at once. "How did you kill Kethvar?" Sarah was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft, but everyone heard her. He was used to hunting things that were afraid, things that ran and screamed and begged. He didn't know what to do with something that hunted him back. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of beings that had terrified the galaxy for millions of years. None of you do. The truth of it hit them like a physical blow. These were creatures that ruled through fear and strength. They had built their entire civilization on the idea that the strong dominated the weak. But what happened when the weak refused to be weak? This changes nothing, Zorthax roared suddenly. He leaped down from the Vorthak platform, landing on the main floor with a crash that shook the building. So you killed one of us, so what? I am stronger than Kethvar ever was. The other Predator Lords made sounds of agreement. Their pride was wounded, but their leader was right. One victory did not make the humans equal to them. You want to join our federation? Zorthax continued. Prove you belong here. Fight me. Sarah looked at the massive creature. He was 9 feet tall and built like a tank. His claws were longer than her forearms. His hide was thick enough to stop bullets. Okay, she said. The simple answer surprised everyone. They had expected her to refuse, to try to negotiate, to show some fear. Instead, she just said, okay. Elder Kethmore stood up. If this is to be a formal challenge, it must follow the old rules. Combat in the sacred circle. Victory by death or surrender. No weapons except those you carry. Sarah patted her empty holster. She had used all her ammunition killing the other Predator Lords. I don't have any weapons. Then you will die, Zorthax said with satisfaction. Maybe, Sarah agreed, but probably not. The sacred circle was in the center of the council chamber. It was a raised platform 50 feet across, surrounded by energy barriers. For thousands of years, the greatest warriors in the galaxy had fought and died there. Today it would see something new. The two fighters stepped into the circle. The barriers hummed to life, sealing them inside. Sarah stood in the center, small and blood-stained and tired. She looked like she was about to collapse. Zorthax circled her slowly like a cat playing with a mouse. His red eyes glowed with hunger. I will not make this quick, he promised. I will make you scream like your friends screamed. Sarah didn't answer. She was watching him move, learning his patterns. Nothing to say, little prey? Zorthax taunted. No begging? No tears? I'm thinking, Sarah said, about what? How much it will hurt. About hunting. Zorthax struck without warning. His claws cut through the air where Sarah's head had been a split second before, but she wasn't there anymore. The fight began. It was not the fight anyone expected. Zorthax was bigger, stronger, and faster than any human had a right to be. His claws could cut through steel. His hide could turn blades. Sarah was just a tired young woman with no weapons and no special powers, but she was human, and humans had spent 2 million years learning how to hunt things, bigger and stronger than themselves. Sarah didn't try to match Zorthax's strength. Instead, she used his strength against him. When he charged, she moved aside and let his momentum carry him into the barrier wall. When he slashed with his claws, she ducked and struck at his joints. She was patient. She was persistent. She was smart. And slowly, impossibly, she began to win. The watchers in the chamber couldn't believe what they were seeing. The human was fighting like no creature they had ever seen before. She wasn't trying to be stronger than her enemy. She was trying to be better. She's wearing him down, breathed Ambassador T'Chen. Impossible, said Hive Speaker Zaxth. Predator Lords do not tire. But Zorthax was tiring. For the first time in his long life, he was fighting someone who wouldn't give up, someone who wouldn't be intimidated, someone who got back up every time he knocked her down, someone who looked at him like he was food. What are you? He gasped during a brief break in the fighting. Sarah wiped blood from her mouth. I'm human, she said simply. That tells me nothing. It tells you everything. Sarah began to circle him now, and somehow she looked like the predator while he looked like prey. We're the species that chased mammoths across continents. We're the ones who ran deer to death on the African plains. Zorthax tried to strike again, but his movements were slower now, less precise. We don't hunt with claws or fangs, Sarah continued, dodging easily. We hunt with our minds. We hunt with persistence. We hunt until our prey dies of exhaustion. The Predator Lord tried to roar, but it came out as more of a wheeze. I am not prey. You are now. In the end, it wasn't claws or strength that won the fight. It was simple human stubbornness. Sarah just refused to give up, refused to quit, refused to die. Zorthax collapsed first. Sarah stood over him, swaying with exhaustion. The great predator lord looked up at her with something like wonder in his red eyes. "How?" he whispered. "I told you," Sarah said. "We're persistence hunters. We don't stop." She could have killed him then. The rules of the sacred circle said she had that right. Instead, she stepped back. "I accept your surrender," she said. Zorthax closed his eyes. In his culture, this was a mercy worse than death. But he was too tired to argue. The barriers fell. Sarah walked out of the circle on unsteady legs. The council chamber was completely silent. Elder Kethmore found his voice first. "The human has won," he announced formally. "By the ancient laws, humanity has earned the right to join the Galactic Combat Federation." But no one was moving. No one was celebrating or protesting. They were all staring at Sarah with a mixture of fear and confusion. "What are you people?" Elder Kethmore asked quietly. Sarah looked around the chamber one more time. At the crystal beings and the insect creatures and the stone giants. At all the species that had thought they were predators. "We're humans," she said, "and we're not going away." The medical drones worked quickly on Sarah's injuries while the council tried to understand what had just happened. She sat on a simple chair in the center of the chamber, letting the machines patch her wounds. "This is unprecedented," Elder Kethmore said to his advisors. "In 10,000 years of Federation history, no species has ever joined by defeating two predator lords in single combat." "They didn't just defeat them," whispered crystalline mind Veltar. His thoughts were still visible as confused lights under his skin. "The human killed Kethvar and broke Zorthax without using any advanced weapons, just thinking." Sarah finished with the medical drones and stood up. She looked better now, though her uniform was still stained with blood. Her own blood and alien blood mixed together. "So," she said simply, "do we pass?" The question hung in the air like smoke. By the ancient laws, humanity had more than earned membership, but the implications were bigger than just adding one more species to the Federation. "There must be a vote," Elder Kethmore said finally. "All species must decide." But before the vote could begin, alarms started screaming through the station. Red lights flashed. Emergency broadcasts filled the air in a dozen languages. The massive view screens around the chamber showed the same terrifying image. Ships. Hundreds of them. Approaching the station fast. "Devourers," breathed Hive Speaker Zakth. The Devourer fleet. Sarah had never heard of them, but the fear in the chamber was thick enough to taste. Even the Predator Lords looked worried. "What are Devourers?" she asked. Elder Kethmore's face went pale. "They are what we were before we learned to think. Pure hunger, pure destruction. They consume everything in their path." The view screens showed the approaching ships more clearly now. They were not built, they were grown. Like massive insects made of metal and flesh, with weapons that looked like stinger tails and mandibles that could bite through planets. "They come every few centuries," Stone Chief Mordock rumbled. "We fight them off, barely. Millions die each time." "How many ships?" Sarah asked. 700, the station commander reported. "Maybe 800. The biggest fleet we've ever seen." The chamber erupted in panic. Beings that had ruled the galaxy for millennia were suddenly reduced to frightened children. "We must evacuate," someone shouted. "The station cannot be defended," called another. "Run," screamed a third voice. "Everyone run!" But Sarah was not running. She was thinking. "How do you usually fight them?" she asked Elder Kethmore. "With everything we have," he replied. "Every warship, every warrior, every weapon. We throw ourselves at them until they retreat." "And how many of you die?" "Half, sometimes more." Sarah nodded slowly. "That's a terrible strategy." The statement was so simple, so matter-of-fact, that it cut through the panic like a blade. The chamber fell quiet. "Excuse me?" Elder Kethmore said. "You're fighting them like predator lords," Sarah explained. "Head on. Strength against strength. But they're bigger and stronger than you, so you lose half your people every time." "What would you suggest?" The question came from Zorthax. The great predator lord was sitting up now, still weak from their fight but listening carefully. Sarah looked at the view screens again. The Devourer ships were getting closer. Soon they would be in weapons range. "I need to know everything about them," she said. "How they move, how they think, how they fight. Everything." For the next 10 minutes, the greatest military minds in the galaxy briefed one small human on their oldest enemy. The Devourers were ancient. They had been in space when most species were still crawling in primordial soup. They were not intelligent in the way other beings understood intelligence. They were more like a force of nature. They traveled in massive fleets, consuming entire star systems. They turned planets into food and populations into fuel for their war machines. They could not be reasoned with. They could not be bargained with. They could only be fought, and they were very, very good at fighting. They always used the same tactics, Elder Kethamore explained. Overwhelming numbers. They surround a target and attack from all sides at once. How do they coordinate? Sarah asked. With so many ships, how do they work together? The Queen Mind, answered Hive Speaker Zaxth. One massive ship at the center of the fleet. It controls all the others. Sarah smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. It was not a nice smile. Show me. The view screens focused on the center of the Devourer fleet. There it was. A ship the size of a small moon covered in organic armor and bristling with weapons. Smaller ships swarmed around it like antibodies protecting a cell. That's their weakness, Sarah said. Weakness, Stone Chief Mordock rumbled. That ship is the most heavily defended target in the galaxy. No force has ever gotten close to it. Because you've been trying to fight through the defenses, Sarah replied. What if you didn't have to? She turned to face the council. I need to talk to your military commanders. All of them. Right now. The human thinks she can win a battle that has defeated us for millennia. One of the Predator Lords sneered. Sarah looked at him with those cold, dark eyes. I think I can hunt something that's never been hunted before. The next hour was chaos. Sarah worked with military officers from a dozen species, planning something that had never been attempted. The Devourers were almost in range now. Soon the battle would begin. This plan is insane, Admiral Thekvar of the Vorthak Warfleet said. It will never work. It only has to work once, Sarah replied. The plan was simple in concept but terrifying in execution. Instead of meeting the Devourer fleet head-on, they would let the enemy surround the station. Then, while the main Devourer force was focused on the station's defenses, a small strike team would punch through their lines, but not to attack the Queen Mind directly. That was what they expected. Instead, Sarah's team would target the Queen Mind's food supply. Devourers need to eat constantly, she explained. They're like sharks. If they stop moving, stop consuming, they die. The Queen Mind has to feed the entire fleet, she pointed to the tactical display. See those smaller ships around the edges? Those are harvesters. They collect resources and bring them back to the Queen Mind. So? Admiral Thekvar asked. So we kill the harvesters. All of them. Then we wait. The alien commanders looked at her like she was insane. You want to starve them to death? Elder Kethamore asked. That would take years. No, Sarah said patiently. I want to make them desperate. Hungry things make mistakes. When the Queen Mind realizes its fleet is starving, it will have to choose. Retreat or attack immediately. It will attack, Zorthak said with certainty. Devourers always attack. Exactly, Sarah smiled. But this time it will attack alone. Without its escorts, without its support ships. Just the Queen Mind and whatever weapons it carries personally. Understanding began to dawn on their faces. A starving Queen Mind is still incredibly dangerous. Admiral Thekvar warned. Everything dangerous can be hunted, Sarah replied. You just have to know how. The Devourer fleet reached the station just as Sarah's plan went into motion. The battle began with the sound of 1,000 thunderstorms. Federation ships engaged the enemy fleet from all sides. Weapons that could crack moons lit up space like stars. The station's defenses opened fire with everything they had. It looked like every other battle they had fought against the Devourers. Chaos and death and desperate courage. But this time was different. This time, while the main fleet held the enemy's attention, small teams of Federation ships slipped around the edges of the battle. Their targets were not the massive warships. Their targets were the little harvest vessels that most commanders ignored. Sarah herself led one of the strike teams. She flew a borrowed fighter, modified with the best weapons the Federation could provide. Behind her came volunteers from a dozen species, beings who had decided to trust a human's plan. Target the harvest ships only, she ordered over the comm. Ignore everything else. If it's not carrying food, it's not our problem. The harvest ships were lightly armed and protected. They were designed to strip resources from dead worlds, not to fight. Under normal circumstances, they would have been easy prey. But the Devourer fleet had hundreds of them, and they were scattered across light years of space. It took 4 hours to hunt them all down, 4 hours of careful stalking, of patience, of the kind of persistence that only humans truly understood. One by one, the harvest ships died. Their resources were scattered into space. Their supplies were lost forever. And in the center of the fleet, the Queen Mind began to starve. The change was subtle at first. The massive ship's movements became more erratic. Its commands to the fleet grew confused. Then, as Sarah had predicted, desperation set in. The Queen Mind abandoned its escorts and charged straight at the station. Its own weapons were massive, planet killers that could crack worlds. But it was alone now, cut off from its support network. All units focus fire on the Queen Mind, Sarah ordered. Everything you have. Right now, the combined fleet of the Federation turned their guns on a single target. Weapons from 100 worlds built by dozens of species, all firing at once. The Queen Mind was tough, tougher than anything they had ever faced. It absorbed punishment that would have destroyed entire fleets, but even it had limits. The first crack appeared in its armor. Then the second, then the third. It's working, Admiral Thekfer breathed. By the ancient void, it's actually working. The Queen Mind began to list. Its weapons fell silent one by one. The massive organism that had tea. The celebration lasted 3 days. Across the station, beings who had never spoken to each other shared drinks and stories. Crystal entities sang with stone giants. Insect swarms danced with energy beings. For the first time in Federation history, every species felt like they were part of something bigger. At the center of it all sat Sarah Chen, still in her blood-stained uniform, still looking like she might fall over from exhaustion, but she was smiling. "You saved us all," Elder Kethmore said, raising his glass. "The Devourers have been our greatest fear for 10,000 years. In one day you showed us how to defeat them." Sarah shook her head. "I didn't defeat them, we did. All of us working together in the way you taught us," corrected Admiral Thekvar. The Vorthak officer had been one of her strongest supporters during the battle. "Fighting like hunters instead of warriors, there's a difference?" asked Stone Chief Mordok. "Warriors fight to prove they are strong," Sarah explained. "Hunters fight to survive. Warriors follow honor codes. Hunters do whatever works." Around the table, the greatest military minds in the galaxy nodded slowly. They were beginning to understand something that would change everything. The Devourers were not really our enemies, Hive Speaker Zakth clicked. They were just a problem that needed solving. "Exactly," Sarah said. "And humans are very good at solving problems." But not everyone was celebrating. In the corner of the Great Hall, a group of Predator Lords sat in angry silence. They had built their entire culture on the idea that strength was everything. What Sarah had done challenged that belief. "She used tricks," one of them muttered. "Deception. That is not honorable combat." "Honor doesn't matter if you're dead," replied Zorthax. He was walking with a cane now, still recovering from his fight with Sarah. But there was something different in his eyes. "Something like respect. You defend her?" asked his packmate. "I understand her," Zorthax said. "She is not stronger than me. But she beat me anyway. That takes a different kind of strength." The conversation was interrupted by an announcement. Elder Kethmore was calling for attention. "Friends," he said, his voice carrying across the hall, "we are here to celebrate victory, but we are also here to make a decision." The room grew quiet. The human application for Federation membership was approved by combat. But that was before what happened with the Devourers. Now we must decide something bigger. He looked directly at Sarah. "The question is not whether humans can join our Federation. The question is whether we are ready to learn from them." Murmurs ran through the crowd. This was bigger than anyone had expected. "What are you proposing?" asked Crystalline Mind Veltar. Elder Kethmore stood up. "I propose that we offer humanity a permanent seat on the High Council. Not as members, but as advisors, teachers." The hall erupted. Some beings cheered. Others shouted in anger. The Predator Lords roared their objections. "They are not even a spacefaring civilization," one of them snarled. "They have been in the galaxy for less than a century. And in that time they have taught us more about warfare than we learned in the previous millennium," Elder Kethmore replied calmly. Sarah stood up. The noise died down as everyone turned to look at her. "I appreciate the offer," she said quietly. "But I think you're missing the point." Elder Kethmore frowned. "What do you mean?" Sarah looked around the room at all the alien faces. "You want us to teach you how to think like humans. But that's not what you need." She walked to the center of the room. You need to learn how to think like yourselves. Better versions of yourselves. The confusion was obvious on every face. The Vorthak are incredible hunters, Sarah continued. But you only hunt for sport. What if you hunted to solve problems? The crystalline minds can process information faster than any computer. But you only use that power to contemplate philosophy. What if you used it to find solutions? She pointed to different groups around the room. The stone giants are patient and enduring. The hive speakers work perfectly as a team. The energy beings can adapt to any situation. Understanding began to dawn on some faces. You don't need to become human, Sarah said. You need to become what you already are, but focused on survival instead of dominance. And what about humans? Asked Ambassador Tichin. What will your people become? Sarah was quiet for a moment. We'll become what we've always been. The species that doesn't give up. The ones who solve the problems everyone else thinks are impossible. And if we refuse this offer? Asked a predator lord. If we reject your teaching? Sarah shrugged. Then you reject it. We're not here to force anything on anyone. But you will keep solving problems, Elder Kethmore said. It wasn't a question. Of course, Sarah replied. It's what we do. The vote was called the next day. Every species in the Federation had a voice. The debate lasted 12 hours. In the end, the decision was unanimous. Humanity would join the Federation, not as warriors or as conquerors, but as problem solvers. They would have a seat on every major council. They would advise on every major decision, but most importantly, they would teach. This changes everything, Elder Kethmore said after the vote. The age of strength ruling the galaxy is ending. No, Sarah corrected. It's just beginning. Real strength isn't about who can hit the hardest. It's about who can keep going when everything else falls apart. She stood up and walked toward the door. Where are you going? Elder Kethmore asked. Sarah paused at the threshold. Back to Earth. I have a report to write and... She looked back at Kethvar's head, still sitting where she had dropped it days ago. I have some funerals to attend. When will you return? When you need us, Sarah said simply. When there's a problem that needs solving. As she walked away, the council members watched her go. This small, tired human who had changed their entire civilization in less than a week. What have we done? Whispered one of them. What we should have done long ago, replied Elder Kethmore. We've learned to think. 6 months later, the first human advisors arrived at Federation headquarters. They were not soldiers or diplomats. They were engineers and doctors and teachers and farmers, people who solved problems for a living. They looked at the galaxy's challenges with fresh eyes. Food shortages became agricultural puzzles to solve. Border disputes became negotiation problems. Ancient feuds became opportunities for creative solutions. The galaxy began to change. Species that had been enemies for centuries started working together. Problems that had seemed impossible suddenly had answers. The Federation grew stronger and more peaceful than it had ever been, and at the center of it all was a simple idea that one tired Cadet had brought to the stars. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is refuse to give up. Sometimes, the best way to fight is to think, and sometimes, the smallest person in the room has the biggest impact. The predator lords eventually came around. It took time, but they learned to hunt problems instead of prey. Some of them became the best problem solvers in the galaxy. Zorthax was one of them. The human was right, he admitted to his packmates one day. There is a different kind of strength. The strength to keep going when everything tells you to quit. And what is that strength called? Asked one of the younger predator lords. Zorthax thought about it for a moment. He remembered the look in Sarah Chen's eyes when she had stood over Kethvar's body. The cold determination that had never wavered. Humanity, he said finally. It's called humanity. The galaxy was a different place now, safer, more peaceful, more hopeful. And somewhere on a small blue planet at the edge of the Milky Way, Sarah Chen smiled as she read the reports coming in from across the stars. Problems being solved. Species working together, the strong protecting the weak instead of preying on them. It was, she thought, a good start. But it was only a start. There were still problems out there. Still challenges that seemed impossible. Still situations that would require someone to step forward and say the words that changed everything. Who's next?